Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service. Welcome to another edition of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers about their career in and out of the ring, talk about their careers as wrestlers as well as the acts of community service and charity work that they do. And with me today, I have a very special guest. He is a former Missouri heavyweight champion, a Hall of Famer, actually, with me here. And he's had a heck of a career in the ring and out of the ring.
Yes.
It is my pleasure to welcome to the show Dennis McHawes. Is that right?
That is correct. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Let's talk about your childhood. Where did you grow up, Dennis?
I was born and raised about 30 miles south of St. Louis. So kind of in the heart of the NWA territory, wrestling at the Chase. Grew up, hearing Larry Matisick on Sunday mornings and watching Bruiser Brody and Harley Race and people like that.
That was a heck of a time. I mean, the territories all around the country, wherever you grew up, you knew you had to tune into wrestling. I mean, that was a must-see event. I mean, it's always been a part of pop culture, but that truly was where it started in the, the 60s, 70s, and even into the 80s,
Oh, definitely. It laid the foundation of so much of the fantastic time period.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly was definitely one of the high points of the business. And so, when did you know that this was something you wanted to do?
Like I said, I had always been a fan growing up in this area. Wrestling was very big. Pat O'Connor, the former NWA World Champion, was a close friend of the family. I grew up around Pat as a child, was a fan. But honestly, it was in 1983. I was 11 years old, and my dad took me to see the first live event that I had ever seen. And the main event that night was Ric Flair versus Bruiser Brody for the NWA World Title. And it was a 2 out of 3 falls in St. Louis. And I had always loved wrestling, but after seeing my hero Bruiser Brody live, seeing that, I knew at that age that someday I wanted to be inside that ring. And really, so from about the age of 11 on, it was one of my goals in life.
Yeah, Bruiser Brody seemed like a very charitable guy, always loved talking to the youth, the kids, and definitely seemed like a caring individual.
Yeah, Brody, he did a lot of media relation stuff here in St. Louis. He worked with a lot of local businesses, and Herb Simmons can tell you, Herb and Frank went way back. A lot of appearances, different things with youth groups, reaching out to the public because, I think Brody was one that really understood. In the same way, in later years, as I got to know Harley Race, who became one of my very best friends that I've ever had in my life, seeing how Harley interacted with the fans, interacted with the community, the places that we would do shows at, and just his overall how much he gave back to the people that put him where he was. And that was coming to town. Harley and his wife would stay with me and my wife, or we would go to their lake house and stay. And there just wasn't any time that we couldn't, you'd go to dinner, no matter where you're at, somebody would come up, and they would interrupt and want a picture with Harley Race, tell a story about Harley Race. And I asked him one time, I said, does that ever bother you? And he says, it will bother me when they stop. He said, because if it wasn't for the fans, it wasn't for our community, he said, I would not have had the life that I've had. And so, working for Harley, I learned not just a lot about wrestling, but I learned a lot about.
He was, and look at the career that he ended up having. I mean, the first King of the Ring, multi-time world champion. I mean, you couldn't learn from two iconic legends of the business there.
Absolutely.
And so you started training, eventually started training to become a wrestler. Was the training process easy for you, rigorous? What was it like for you?
Back in the, I hate to sound like I give away my age a little bit when I say back in the day. I had just gotten out of the Marine Corps. I'd served 4 years in the United States Marines. I was a Desert Storm veteran, combat
Oh wow.
veteran, uh, and so I got out, moved back to the St. Louis area, and that's when the training started. Just kind of a quick story. We had my father, who was still alive at the time, and my brother. We were actually going downtown St. Louis to see a Cardinal game. And we drove by a location that hosts wrestling events, and they said, pro wrestling here this weekend or whatever. And say, hey, man, I haven't been to a show since I've been in the military. I said, let's go to that.
Yes.
And so we went, and as I'm sitting in the crowd that Saturday night, in 1994, and I guess it was the last time I've ever sat in a crowd as a fan. I was watching, and I said, I can do this. And my dad was like, "You're crazy." And I said, maybe I am, but I said, I can do this. And I saw one of the wrestlers, a guy by the name of Dump Truck Dave Perry, going into the bar area of this club, and asked him, say, how do I start? How do I get to do this? Told me where to come to on that Monday night, and I was there, and the training started. Back in the early 90s, the pro wrestling business was a lot different than it is today. It was a lot tougher to get into, to be accepted into the business. It was still a very closed society, a really tight fraternity, I guess you'd call it. And not everybody was accepted in. And I mean, you had to have the right look, you had to have the right personality, and you had to have the ability. And when I started training, and I trained with some of the very best that were in St. Louis. In fact, looking back, every guy that trained me has since been inducted into the Independent Hall of Fame as well. So,
Okay.
I was fortunate. Every guy that I had been trained by ended up having great careers themselves, or had already had great careers. But I can tell you, in that time period, when you broke into the business, for the first several months, they just beat the crap out of you. That was really I don't know how else to say it, but they put it to you, and to see if you're going to come back, to see if you had what it took to continue to want to come back and do this. And like I said, I just got out of the Marine Corps. I was young, kind of full of fire, and I can remember leaving there and being mad, because I was like, man, one of these weeks, I'm going to drop the hammer on one of these guys, because I'm tired of getting my butt kicked every weekend here. And so this went on really for several months. And I remember I walked in one night, and they looked at me and they said, okay, now we're going to teach you to work. And I was like, what are you talking about? What have we been doing for months? I'm here several nights a week. What do you mean? And it was that night they started to show me how to be a wrestler. And I was like, oh, man, now I'm in on the secret, huh? Now, now you've pulled the curtain back a little bit and allowed me in. And that's really where the training started,
Yeah.
And being a former football player, being an infantry Marine, physically, I thought I can handle just about anything you throw at me. And I can tell you, training to be a professional wrestler, I've never been so sore. I've never hurt so much or been so tired.
You know, you brought up the Marines a while ago, being a part of that Desert Storm, cycle of events that took place. I mean, that's just a grueling lifestyle. I mean, both being a wrestler and the Marines. Did you find any similarities? Do you feel like the environment was kind of similar at times?
It was because just like I was saying, like just as the wrestling industry was different at that time, society was different, the military was different. There was still, during that era of the Marine Corps, there was still a lot of hazing, as they call it now, initiations into, just proving that you're tough enough to be there. And so there was some similarities, and a lot of what I drew from in the Marine Corps as far as self-discipline and toughness, being able to stick it out, and with that kind of that attitude that you'll never be able to make me quit, no matter what you do to me.
Right.
You're never going to make me stop. So there was many things that I took from the Marine Corps that no doubt helped me. And actually, the first gimmick that I did when I got into the business was a character called the drill instructor, and that was my whole first part of my career. That's what I wrestled as, and it was a name that was given to me by one of the guys training me.
Wow, it's
kind of like, man, the look you just got out of the Marine Corps, and so that was what I kind of carried, that persona, that Marine persona, into the ring, and that's what the character was for so many years. And had great success with it, and got to go and do a lot of things as the drill instructor. And so there was definitely a lot of similarities, a lot of things that I carried forward from my experience in the military into the ring.
That's just unbelievable that you have had that experience at such a young age, and then taking that to wrestling and having a gimmick that, how appropriate is it that you were able to do something?
Sure.
They say like some of the best gimmicks in wrestling are the person dialed up to 11. So that's just amazing how you were able to kind of combine the two.
And that is such a true statement, whether it was the drill instructor in that era, or, the character that I've been for many years now of Attila Khan. It really is kind of that inner person of who you are, and then you just turn the volume all the way up, like you're going to blow the speakers out with it, right? I mean, that's who that character is, and those are the best characters, because when you try to portray a gimmick that isn't you, not only do you not believe it, the fans are never going to believe it,
right?
So when it is you, like with the drill instructor, I knew how to walk like a Marine. I knew how to talk like a Marine. I knew how to act like a Marine. I knew how to carry myself, and it was believable. I started wrestling. I'd only been out of the Marine Corps about 60 days, so you bet it was believable. I was still more Marine than I was a civilian.
Right.
And so it really, I was fortunate to have that experience. I was fortunate to have the ability to parlay that into that character, and set me on my road to my career with wrestling.
So you got into the business, you served in the Marine Corps, and you came up with this unbelievable character as the drill instructor. Who were some of the people that you enjoyed working with throughout your years as a wrestler?
I tell you what, I have been so fortunate throughout all the years, right off the top of my head, probably my favorite opponent, and still to this day is my favorite opponent, is Haku. I couldn't even count how many times we have wrestled each other through the years. Cowboy Bob Orton, I had the opportunity. I'd only been in the business probably about a year or so the first time I got to work with Bob Orton. Bob Orton's one of the best that has ever laced up a pair of boots.
Oh, no doubt.
He's
No doubt.
he absolutely phenomenal. Bob's another one. I couldn't even put a number on how many times I've had the chance to work with him. He's one of my favorites. Um, the Barbarian, great in the ring. Abdullah the Butcher
Ooh. Ooh,
was
wow.
was a lot of fun. What
Yeah.
was a lot of fun. Uh, uh, Tommy Dreamer, another one of my favorite matches. Um, Jerry Law Jerry Lawler would be another one.
The
Uh,
King.
Fantastic to work with, the King, and I mean the guy for he gives me at 50, he makes me feel like a kid, because that guy's, he's got some years on me, and
Oh,
just
yeah.
phenomenal, just phenomenal in the ring. So I mean, that is, some of the names, that everybody knows. But I would really feel, that there's some guys here in the St. Louis area and the Midwest that I've wrestled and worked with numerous times. The Human Wrecking Ball, Pete Madden, Gary the Night Train Jackson. Pete Madden was one. Uh, you always wanted to work with him. You wanted to show up to Billy, that you were working with Pete. You never wanted to follow Pete because you knew no matter what you did, it was never going to be better than what he did that night. And he could be out there with a broomstick, and he was still going to have the best match of the night. Gary Jackson. Gary and I have been wrestling, facing each other since probably 1994,
Ooh.
and you're not going to find anybody probably more talented than Gary Jackson.
Who came up with the name Attila Khan?
It was a kind of a joint effort between myself, Herb Simmons, and Larry Matisek. I had stepped away from the business for a while, really to get surgically repaired in a lot of places, and my body was pretty beat up. And my daughters had been born after my career had ended as the drill instructor, and they'd always heard about their dad, the wrestler, and they found a bunch of the magazines with pictures and videos and different stuff, and they became involved. And so I kind of wanted to start to get back into business. And actually, before Attila ever existed, I had talked to Herb about, said maybe I'd come back, I'll manage, right? I'll be a manager. And they're like, I don't know. I think there's more to it than that. And I said, I don't know. And then so I'd actually went through a reconstructive shoulder surgery and had a bunch of pins and screws and stuff put in. And once I healed up from that, I actually started feeling pretty good. Sure. And so I got a hold of Larry and Herb, and I said, I think I'm ready to get back in the ring. And I said, but I don't move like the drill instructor anymore, and I don't look like the drill instructor anymore. And so what are we going to do? And I said, man, I just want to be the biggest, nastiest, meanest heel that we got. I just want to be a monster. I want to have no redeeming qualities. I just want to be mean. And I'm like, okay, we like it. So I called Abdullah the Butcher, and I said, hey, Abby, this is idea that I got. He's like, hey, here's where you get the boots. Here's how you get the pants. Do this, do that, take the fork, the whole bit. And I said, okay. And so we started talking about the name, Attila Khan. What do we want? And so literally was sitting around trying to think of some of the meanest people in the history of the world, right? And we had kicked around like something like Vlad from Vlad the Impaler, all these just Barabbas, who is, from the Bible, is, the guy that was, that they gave the choice of either Jesus or Barabbas. And, he's about as bad as you're going to get, right?
Yeah.
And so we kept kicking around. And then I was like, man, Genghis Khan, Attila the Hun. I was like, man, those are two pretty bad dudes.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
And I was like, what if I took Attila and Khan and, from Genghis Khan, Attila the Hun, and made Attila Khan.
Yeah.
And so I called Larry and Herb, and I said, hey, I think I've come up with the name. And they said, what is it? And I said, Attila Khan. And they're like, that's it. It fits. We love it. And Attila was born. And, so when we first debuted the character, I was like, hey, look, I said, put me on early. I got to make sure my body's going to be able to handle doing this. And I want to make sure the crowd's going to respond, right? Man, they may look at this and go, oh my God, who is this guy? And they didn't. It was over from the first night that we were out there. And something that's been very special about being Attila, one, to be honest, I've enjoyed this character more than the first part of my career. First part of the career, there's a lot of stress because you're chasing a goal, you're trying to make it, you're trying to get to the next level. When Attila came around, Attila did it because he loved wrestling, right? That's why I came back, and so I enjoyed being Attila a tremendous amount, and it's had a lot of fun with the character through the years, and there's still some gas in the tank for Attila. Still do some pretty good stuff, and but it's been a lot of fun being this monster.
You definitely deserve all the accolades and the achievements that you've accomplished during your career. So where can people find you, Dennis, on what you're doing as far as wrestling goes and any appearances?
Sure. So Attila Khan, if you go to Facebook, the Attila Khan, ATTILAKHAN, on Twitter, Attila Khan. You can find me there as well, and you'll know it's me because there's a big bloody guy with white eyes, staring back at you. Well, I sure appreciate it, and just thank you so much. It's an honor to be able to do this, to get out and talk about a business that I love so much, that has meant so much, and also it's humbling, that people want to hear what we do and the effort and work that in this, because what you do isn't easy. It's a lot of work, and I appreciate that you take the time to tell our stories, and so thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. We're gonna keep on doing the show as long as we can.
If there's anything I can do, if anybody that you'd like to get in touch with or whatever, I can try to help you any way I can. So I sure appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thank you again.
Thanks again.
All right. Take care. Bye. This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.